Wonderful. Good morning and welcome to the October 7th, 2021 Social Equity Working Group. Before we get started, I'd like to ask today's interpreter, Nancy, to introduce herself and please walk us through how to access our interpretation services for today's meeting.
Good morning. My name is Nancy Hand. I'm the Spanish interpreter for this morning's meeting. I will be giving instructions in Spanish for using the interpretation function, and then I will repeat them in English. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, el globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, un celular, tableta, etcétera, presione los puntos suspensivos o 3 puntos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. To use the Zoom interpretation feature, please scroll down to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, which looks like a globe, and select English as your language. If you are joining using the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now I'd like to ask our clerk, Evelia Castellanos, to confirm if we have a quorum.
We have a quorum, Chair Moreno.
Thank you. I'd like to review the process for both the working group members as well as members of the public who wish to speak under public comment. For working group members, when you'd like to speak, please click on the raise your hand icon in the Zoom control panel. You have control of your video and mute, so please click the raised hand icon and turn on your camera when you'd like to speak, and I will call on you. Do we have any questions before we continue? Hearing none, Evelia, would you please provide a quick reminder on how the public comment will work?
As noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda, in addition to emailed comments, the public also may provide live comments during today's meeting. To provide a live verbal comment during the meeting, please join the Zoom meeting either by computer or phone at the time for public comments. Members of the public are advised to raise hand if you wish to provide comments. The raise hand feature can be found on the Zoom toolbar for those who are joining via computer or by entering *9. For those joining via telephone only, the chair will call on members of the public by name of those joining via computer and by the last 3 digits of your telephone number. For those joining via telephone, all comments received prior to the close of the meeting will be made part of the meeting record. The instructions for providing live comments also are on the bottom of the cover page of today's meeting agenda, which can be accessed from the homepage of Sandec's website at www.sandec.org.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is a welcome and introduction. I'd like to take this opportunity for working group members to introduce themselves. Please include your organization and the area of the region that you serve so that the public joining us today are aware. I will start, and my name is Vivian Moreno. I'm the council member for District 8 in the city of San Diego. I'm going to call on Lisa Cuestas. If you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Chair Moreno. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Cuestas, representing Casa Familiar nonprofit organization in San Isidro.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And let's move on to Claire Grubner.
Good morning. This is Claire Grubner. I'm representing Olivewood Gardens and Learning Center. We support National City and San Diego South Bay.
Thank you. Craig, if you'd like to introduce yourself too.
Surely. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Craig Jones. I'm a representative from the Alliance for Regional Solutions, representing 70 plus nonprofit community organizations in North County, roughly the area north of Highway 56. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim Henley. Henley, if you're here.
Good morning. This is Kim Heinley. I'm the Executive Director at Bayside Community Center located in Linda Vista.
Wonderful. Brenda Lee. Okay, we'll move on to Carol Lewis.
Good morning. I'm Carol Lewis. I'm with El Cajon Collaborative representing El Cajon and East County. Thank you.
Thank you. Konani?
Good morning. My name is Kunani Martinez. I'm the faculty director of the National Latino Research Center at Cal State San Marcos in North County, San Diego.
Thank you. Elizabeth Liu?
Mohammed is here and
Oh, wonderful.
oh, she's here too. So, yep, sorry, Elizabeth is here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Haneen Mohammed. I'm representing City Heights CDC, and we serve the Mid-City area.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Faye, if you're available.
Yes, hi, this is Fez Seligman with Operation Samahan Health Center, and we represent the City of National City in the South Bay region.
Wonderful. Thank you. Barry, if you're here, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
I don't think he's here yet.
Okay. Carmela Munoz, are you available?
Carmela,
Community Clinic.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Is anybody here from Chula Vista Community Collaborative? No, hearing nobody. Okay. Did I miss anybody?
Yeah, you missed me, Erica Leary with Vista Community Clinic.
Thank you. Wonderful. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Mohammed Tuama with the Newcomer Support and Development. We're a partner with Nile Sisters, and we're representing East County and Refugee and Middle Eastern community.
Thank you so much. Anybody else I missed? Yes, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt there. Yeah, my name is Randy Torres Van Vlick. I'm here on behalf of City Heights CDC, and Haneen and I will be tag teaming in the meeting today. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Madam Chair, I'm Elizabeth Liu with Nile Sisters. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that would like to introduce themselves that I might have missed?
Sure. This is Rosina from Olive Gardens. We represent the South Bay area, specifically National City, and incorporate cities like Lincoln Acres and Paradise Hills.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think that is everybody, but this is the time to speak for you to introduce yourself. Wonderful. Okay. So do we have any comments from the public, clerk, on this item?
I don't see any hands raised.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay. Item number 2 is member and public comment. If working group members have any comments or announcements of interest to the rest of the working group, please either turn your camera or raise your hand at this time. And let me see if we have anybody. I see Randy and Rosina. Would you guys like to address the body?
Did I raise my hands by accident?
No, you had your camera on. So that's why.
Okay. Let me turn it off then. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
No worries. Wonderful. Okay, anybody from the public, any members of the public, that this is the opportunity to address the working group on any issue within the jurisdiction of Sandec that is not on the agenda. And clerk, if you could verify if there is any public comment.
There are no hands raised, Chair Moreno.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to the approval of the meeting minutes from September 23rd, 2021. May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved, Madam.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Wonderful. Is that Craig that made the motion?
Yes. Yes, motion to approve.
May I have a second?
Mohammed Tuama.
Thank you very much. I have a motion and a second to approve the September 23rd, 2021 minutes. If working group members would like to offer any comments or questions, please either turn on your camera or raise your hand at this time. And let me see, some
Chair
feedback.
Moreno,
Yes,
may I suggest an edit, please?
absolutely.
There's a misspelling, Haneen's last name on the minutes for the September 23rd meeting. So it's Mohammed with 1 M. And so could we make that edit, please? Apologize for that.
Thank you. No. Anybody else who'd like to make any comments or make any edits? Okay, let's see. I do have a motion on the floor with the second. And any members of the public that wish to speak on this item? Clerk, if you could verify that.
I don't have any hands raised for any members of the public.
Wonderful, thank you. So there is a motion and a second on the floor. Clerk, if you could please do the roll call on this item.
Alliance for Regional Solutions, Craig Jones.
Approve as amended. Thank you.
Bayside Community Clinic, Kim Henley.
I need to abstain as I wasn't in attendance at the last meeting.
Casa Familiar, Lisa Cuestas.
Approve.
City Heights CDC, Randy Torres Van Vleck.
Approve.
Chula Vista Community Collaborative, Azucena Lopez de Anda.
Chula Vista is not here.
El Cajon Collaborative, Carol Lewis.
Carol Lewis, aye.
National Latino Research Center, Anani Martinez.
Approve.
Nile Sisters Development Initiative, Elizabeth Liu. Olivewood Gardens, Claire Goldbrunner.
Approve.
Samahan Health Centers, Faith Seligman.
Approve.
Urban Collaborative Project, Brian Berry Pollard. Vista Community Clinic, Erica Leary.
Approve.
And the minutes of September 23rd pass with the correction.
Wonderful, thank you. So as was mentioned, the minutes did pass with one abstention. Thank you very much. We are going to move on to item number 4, which is the chair's report. I'd like to acknowledge Indigenous Peoples Day, which falls on October 11th, as a day to honor and celebrate our tribal nations and the culture and history they contribute to our San Diego region. This is also a reminder to submit your public comment on the 2021 draft regional plan EIR. The deadline for public comment ends October 11th, 2021, and it can be submitted through the SD Forward website. The final EIR is anticipated to be released at the end of the year. If working group members would like to make a comment or have any questions on the chair's report, please either turn on your camera or raise your hand at this time. Seeing nobody with their hand raised. Clerk, if you could verify there's no public comment.
There are no hands raised at the moment, Chair Moreno.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So next up, I'm going to take some items out of order. We are going to be hearing item number 6 first. We have an update on the holistic implementation of adaptation strategy grant. Today we have Katie Henrich from Sandec, who's going to share an update on the concept and themes in the draft equity guidance document. We're asking working group members today for their input and feedback. And so Katie, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Chair Moreno. Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Hentrick. I am an Associate Climate Resilience Planner here at Sandec. And thank you so much for providing me with time to present to you today on the holistic implementation of adaptation strategies project. And for those of you who participate on both the working group and the outreach team, I apologize for the back-to-back presentations. It'll be a little repetitive, but for those of you who are just on this working group, happy to present. Next slide, please. So this project is a collaborative effort. Sandec is working closely with the University of San Diego, specifically the San Diego Regional Climate Collaborative, and the Energy Policy Initiative Center, as well as DUDEC. And today I'll be providing background information on this project, an overview of feedback we've received from the Social Equity Working Group outreach team, information on the project deliverables, and next steps. Next slide, please. So this project is funded through a Caltrans Senate Bill 1 adaptation planning grant, and it builds off work from 2 previous Caltrans funded efforts from the same pot of funding. The first being the Regional Transportation Infrastructure Sea Level Rise Guidance, which analyzed potential sea level rise impacts to regional transportation facilities. And the second being the Regional Adaptation Needs Assessment, which aimed to increase understanding about adaptation planning needs or gaps and also opportunities. So the goal of this project was to fill those information gaps that had been identified from those previous projects and continue to support comprehensive resilience and adaptation planning throughout the region. So there are 4 main deliverables for this project to help guide that type of holistic adaptation planning with the target audience of local agency planners or other staff. And I'll be going into more detail about each of these deliverables later, but they are an economic guidance document, an equity guidance document and training curriculum, a prioritization tool to help rank adaptation strategies or policies, and a prioritization toolkit. And all of these will be publicly available on Sandec's website once they're complete, so anybody can dig into them. And yeah, next slide, please. Okay, so this graphic helps to illustrate how this project and its deliverables fit into the adaptation planning process. So this image is adapted from the state's adaptation planning guide, but our team zhuzhed it up a little bit. We added in the central purple phase 0 right at the core of the document to emphasize that adaptation planning should have this equity first approach. And then we also added in the project deliverables. So you can see at the very, very bottom center, there's the equity guidance document. It's at the core of this whole graphic. And then the arrow kind of to the right with the 3 bubbles pointing, that has the economic guidance document, tool, and toolkit in phases 3 and 4. Next slide, please. So staff last presented to the Social Equity Working Group in February 2020, shortly after funding was announced for this project. It's been quite a long time. Since then, we've met with the Social Equity Working Group outreach team twice. We met with them in February of this year, and at that time we presented a similar project overview, but focusing more intensely on the equity focused components. At that time in the project, we had kind of some early concepts of what we were looking to do, especially with the methodology and what can be included in the equity guidance document. And we also presented on the types of climate impacts we were aiming to address, so things like extreme heat, drought, wildfire, sea level rise, et cetera, focusing on the intersection of equity mitigation and adaptation, and how the equity guidance document could address those overlaps. At that meeting, we received input about the importance of selecting appropriate data to measure equity, as many data sources are inherently racist. And we also got input about how to best share the information in these deliverables with decision makers and the public, which, since the target audience for these documents are local planners, that was really important and useful to hear how can these deliverables be facilitated to audiences outside of that. And then just a few weeks ago, we were back with the outreach team. This time we were focusing on a draft of the equity guidance document and seeking comments on that draft. And I believe we got our comments in yesterday, so we're going to be incorporating those into the final version of our guidance document. Next slide, please. So I'll now discuss what each project deliverable includes, and I'll start with the economic guidance document. This is prepared by the Energy Policy Initiative Center at USD, and it provides details on the different types of economic analyses that can be performed for different adaptation strategies or policies. Because often a lot of local jurisdictions want to know, okay, well, how much is this going to cost me? So this document helps with that. Readers will understand how to identify key climate hazards specific to their community or jurisdiction, how to identify the scope of climate impacts for consideration, like how long, like how widespread, how to calculate costs and benefits of different adaptation strategies, and how to evaluate the results of these different types of economic analyses. Next slide, please. So back to the equity-focused deliverables. These are being prepared by the San Diego Regional Climate Collaborative, and they're also out of USD. So the equity guidance document includes equity indicators and metrics that can be applied to adaptation policies and strategies, how to integrate equity into the adaptation planning and implementation process. So kind of thinking back to that graphic I showed a couple of slides earlier, where that core of the image is the equity first approach. And then the Climate Collaborative is also preparing a training curriculum for local planners. So before they're even going down the path of adaptation planning, they can be walking through this sort of self-led curriculum, thinking about who are the local organizations that I should be reaching out to, how should I be incorporating this into my adaptation plans, that sort of thing. Next slide, please. The last batch of deliverables includes the implementation tool and toolkit, and these are being prepared by Dudek. So this is going to be a decision-making tool for adaptation strategies, helping users prioritize different strategies to maximize co-benefits and achieve multiple objectives. So you're able to rank things based on community priorities or like stakeholder priorities across all of these different categories. And you can show if a strategy is, really maximizing benefits for mitigation, reducing climate impacts, but also incorporating equity and, taking costs into consideration. And then it'll kind of spit out a result and rank that strategy with the others, higher or lower, depending on how you're scoring it. So the tool is designed to be easy to use, we hope, for these local government planners, but also to provide transparent results so that members of the public can see how their local government are ranking these things, and then, provide their own feedback on what those rankings are and if, they agree or not. Dudek is also preparing a toolkit to accompany the tool. And I know tool and toolkit, we should probably name these a little better, but the toolkit will be highlighting case studies, funding, and other implementation needs that often a lot of local government staff are looking for as they're actually realizing these policies and projects in their plans. Next slide, please. So our next steps for this project are to finalize all of those deliverables that I just mentioned. This grant concludes at the end of this calendar year, which is approaching very quickly. So once that grant deadline has been reached, we're going to be again posting all of these deliverables on our website, and the project team would also like to return to this working group once the project is wrapped up to provide a final update. So we will be coordinating with Jane to make that happen. I'll now take any questions, and thank you very much for your time.
I'm on mute. Wonderful. Thank you for the presentation. Any working group members, do you wish to comment? Oh, wonderful. Faye?
Hello, hi, Katie. Thank you so much for this presentation. I think I would just like to ask for some examples and some of your preliminary findings in terms of the study or the strategies that you have implemented through this work. What I'm trying to say is are there some tangible examples of some of your deliverables or findings that you can share to the group that we can take on and move on with our community?
Yeah, so right now, none of them are completed. So I don't have anything to share quite yet, but by December, there will be things that we can share. And I think, you know, if we return to this working group, once things are all done, I think it would actually be really cool to demo that prioritization tool that I mentioned to this working group, because it is something that, you know, you with your different organizations and communities that you serve could use and, you know, kind of rank different strategies that are important to your community and see, you know, what kind of rises to the top and what's maybe, you know, less of a priority. So did that answer your question?
Yes, so that's very interesting actually, because with all the different layers of issues that our communities face, I think that kind of tool will be very helpful. And if you're done and you have those resources and toolkits available, we'd like to really learn more about that.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Yeah, totally. I think that would be great. So we'll make a note of that.
Thank you. Next up, I see Craig Jones, followed by Erica Leary. Craig, the floor is yours.
Thank you. You know, I had a chance to review the draft equity piece. Oh, there's an airplane flying overhead. Let's see if it passes.
Craig, we'll come back to you.
So, thank you.
Erica, if you'd like to take the floor.
Thank you. This could be a dumb question, but I'm just curious if this relates at all to the energy choice initiatives that several local cities are discussing and adopting. Does this tool connect with those types of issues of local cities choosing their energy sources, or are those totally separate issues?
No such thing as a dumb question. I think that's a very good question. So I guess you could kind of say yes and no. Like, for example, community choice aggregation or community choice energy. That's one of these strategies that often is included in a climate action plan, but it does also have some climate adaptation benefits. So that's the type of thing, you know, you could run one of those different economic analyses on to determine, you know, the different type of costs or benefits that may come out of it if, you know, a jurisdiction is maybe more on the fence about implementing it. But again, back to this tool, that's something that you could, you know, rank amongst other strategies and see how it stacks up across all of these different categories like, you know, mitigation, cost, equity, et cetera. And just kind of see, you know, is this like our top priority as a jurisdiction? Is it a little lower? That sort of thing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Okay, back to you, Craig. And we couldn't hear the airplane, just so you know.
Oh, well, that's good. And I apologize for the interruption. I had a chance to review the draft equity portion of this item. Found it to be a very thorough academic generalized treatment. And I was hungering to see how it actually applies to a particular project and specifically to this item. The 4 tables, draft tables at the end, I found very useful and look forward to seeing how they are applied and maybe used as a scorecard for just about any effort, including maybe implementation of the RTP.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and again, I think that all of the different guidance documents kind of feed into how this tool should, you know, work in the scoring of documents, in the scoring of policies and projects. So yeah, I think, like I had mentioned earlier, coming back to this group once the tool is finalized and letting you, you know, noodle around with it and see how it pivots things would be really interesting and useful. And I saw a comment about the draft. The equity guidance draft, I believe, is saved in the social equity working group outreach team SharePoint. And I think Kat or Jane can help send a link to that.
Yes, we can. And it's in the SharePoint that everyone has access to.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other members wishing to be acknowledged? I don't see anybody with their hands raised or with their camera on. Clerk, if you could verify the public's wish to comment.
I don't see any hands raised. Chair Moreno.
Okay, anybody in the public wish to comment? We are going to move on to the next item. I don't see anybody with their hands raised, so thank you. There's no action needed for this item, but we will, sounds like we're going to be seeing you, Katie, sometime soon, so thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, absolutely. So we're moving on to item number 7. Item number 7 is the draft regional equity strategy. Crystal Ayala from Sandec is here to present an overview of the draft regional equity strategy, along with early action initiatives that are going to bridge the digital divide. I'm going to turn it over to Crystal. She's on here.
I'm on. Thank you, Chair Moreno. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm assuming yes, unless someone says no. Good morning, everyone. Many of you have probably heard from me in the past. Most recently, I've been had a change in roles and have been really actively involved in this digital equity work. So we are here today to present an update on developing a regional digital equity strategy to help bridge the digital divide in the San Diego region. We came to you almost a year ago now, back in December, when we were just kicking off this effort. And since then, a lot of work has been done to develop this regional strategy. So we're excited to be here today and excited to present an update. Before we dive in, I just kind of want to set the foundation for a lot of what I'll be talking about in the presentation. Many of you are, actively aware and attuned to what the digital divide means and how it impacts us in our daily lives. And when we're talking about the digital divide, we're talking about the gap between members who have access to high quality broadband services and those who don't. And the digital divide not only accounts for, access to broadband, but also, the ability to have an adequate, reliable device and the skills and tools needed to be able to connect to the internet and benefit from access to information and technology. And when we talk about broadband, sometimes it's used synonymous with internet, but broadband actually refers to a high-speed internet connection. So there's that speed metric integrated into that. And that can be provided by a variety of means. It could be wired or wireless, cable, fiber, satellite. And I'll talk about this in just a minute, but not all internet connections are considered broadband. The Federal Communications Commission has actually established a definition for what it means to have a broadband connection. And we are working closely with the state stakeholders to kind of expand that definition and improve the broadband service connection and definition. So this slide here illustrates the broadband landscape, and you can see it's pretty familiar to how we think about transit. There's a first mile, a middle mile, and the last mile. And regardless of the internet connection that you have, fiber is really that backbone piece. It's essential to delivering broadband and makes up that large, that backbone first mile network. Middle mile is really important. It's the link that provides the backbone to the internet services that a lot of the providers use. And typically the middle mile also relies on fiber. And then that last mile connection is that piece that brings that connection from the internet service providers to your home or to your business. And this can be, through satellite or wireless or cable, like I mentioned earlier. And the COVID-19 pandemic, has really highlighted many of the disparities we're facing, the communities are facing in terms of that last mile component, right? That ability to access reliable and high quality and affordable internet to people's homes. And many of the organizations that, you all represent are hearing firsthand from community members and witnessing, what are some of the detrimental impacts of not having access to high quality broadband. And in today's day and age, it's just unacceptable that there's so many community members that lack that connection, that device. And so it's really clear that the digital divide is essential to so many of our regional priorities, right? It's important for equity, economic development, education, sustainability, public health, safety, the list goes on and on. But it's also really important to the future of transportation and the work that Sandec has been leading with the development of the 2021 regional plan. The regional plan relies on, the future of transportation really relies on technology and connectivity to be able to realize a lot of the investments that we're envisioning for the San Diego region. And normally when we think of—
Crystal, we're not seeing your slides advanced. It's just on the home screen.
Oh.
Yeah, it should be Kat doing the presenting. I think there's a problem there.
Sorry, Kat, can you advance, please?
I think she thought you were trying to share your screen.
No, we don't see your PowerPoint at all.
Thanks for letting me know. Is it opening?
No.
Can anyone see my screen? Because on my end, it says that I'm sharing it.
It's not
okay.
Completely shared yet. It says
it seems to
it's
be
starting to.
Yeah, it says it started to share.
It's a blank screen still, Catherine.
Okay, hold on. Give me a second. Is it still blank?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I've been doing.
You want me to give it a shot?
Yeah, if you could, that would be great. Yeah.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm just going to quickly breeze through these, but I talked about what the digital divide is. I mentioned, gave a quick overview of broadband, and you can see here some of the different technologies that are used to transmit and provide high-speed internet connections. This is a figure I was mentioning when I talked about the distribution of broadband and how it's very similar to how we think about transit. Fiber consisting of that first mile, the middle mile piece, a really important part of getting that backbone fiber to internet service providers, which ultimately make that last mile connection to our homes and businesses. And then here's where we dropped off. When we were talking about the digital divide, right? The importance and significance for just access to opportunities, education, and jobs is paramount. But it's also a really important component of the future of transportation, the work that Sandec is leading with the regional plan. And so when you look at the 5 big moves, you immediately think, okay, the digital divide, the next operating system, right? This is the technology that makes the transportation system work. But really all of these moves rely on heavily on technology and connectivity to work. Complete corridors rely on technology and data to manage in real time how lanes are used, providing real-time lane management, responding to emergency systems, evacuations in real time in a way that's dynamic. Improvements on our intersections also rely on data and technology to be able to connect and transmit data to, automated and connected vehicles. Transit also relies on this connectivity to be able to speak to the traffic lights, optimize the timing of the signals, provide real-time transit information. And mobility hubs and flexible fleets are also extremely reliant on technology and connectivity. Travel kiosks that provide real-time travel information rely on this technology, the ability to manage the curb as well and provide on-demand options, new mobility options, flexible fleets are also, rely especially on technology and connectivity. And so this vision is really reliant on the infrastructure, the communications infrastructure needed to provide these kinds of improvements and solutions in our communities. So as the Metropolitan Planning Organization and the regional forum for decision making with our member agencies, there's a real clear role for Sandec in bridging the digital divide. And there's a lot of things also happening at the state and federal level. Back in August, Governor Newsom issued an executive order directing state agencies to take specific actions to expand high-speed broadband service statewide. At that time, then we came to you all and then proceeded to go to the board of directors in December to seek their adoption of a resolution, which they ultimately ended up adopting and really asserting their commitment to close the digital divide and develop a regional strategy for the San Diego region. So as part of that, we also formed a regional digital divide task force. And that consists of public and private stakeholders. I want to give a shout out to Barry from the Urban Collaborative Project and Ana Ardon from the National Latino Research Center, who are active members of the task force. The task force also consists of many other organizations throughout the region, educational institutions, cities, internet service providers, and we also have, many of you may be familiar with Matt Rantanet from the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association. So it's a great and diverse group that's been providing feedback along the way as we've been developing this digital equity strategy. One of the first steps to really understand what the state of the digital divide in the region was to conduct a broadband gap analysis. And so we spent the first few months, once we kicked off the project, compiling data, really leaving no stone unturned to better understand where there's gaps in infrastructure, where disparities in service may exist, and where there's areas in the region where adoption of broadband is low. And, we faced quite a few challenges in acquiring data that was granular enough to be able to paint a picture of the digital divide in the San Diego region, but we've collected a variety of data sources and have a real solid understanding of what some of the key issues are in the region. However, moving forward, a key strategy, and I'll mention this towards the end of the presentation, will be to advocate for more granular, reliable data to support the kinds of community level analysis that we're interested in conducting. So I'll walk through some of these data points in a bit more detail, but you can see here a snapshot of the digital divide in the San Diego region. We like to think of the digital divide, there's two digital divides in the San Diego region. There's one that's impacting our rural communities and our urban communities. In the region's urban areas, 94% of the population has access to a broadband service that meets that federal definition of broadband. Whereas our rural communities, there's really only 66% of the population that has access to these kinds of services. And just because 94% of the population in the urban area is presumed to have access to service, there's a lot of access issues in our urbanized communities as well. Many low-income households and seniors are far less likely to have internet at home. This is likely due to the cost of the service, which I'll share a little bit more further. And in many school districts, the percentage of students that lack home internet access can reach as high as 40%, which is just unacceptable and just makes it incredibly difficult for them to participate in remote distance learning during the pandemic. We also just completed a survey a few months ago of businesses and employees, and heard from them that many of them, despite having internet connections, are still experiencing problems with poor internet service, and that's really posing a serious challenge for being able to remote work efficiently and successfully. So it's really clear that a lot more work needs to be done to achieve the vision that we've outlined for the strategy. So this map here shows areas in our region where fixed broadband service is available. And when we're talking about fixed broadband, it's usually use ubiquitous with the term just broadband, but this is referring to an internet connection that's typically delivered through like a wired service. This kind of service relies on that middle mile network that I talked about earlier. That fiber infrastructure is really important part of providing fixed broadband services. So the areas in green are highlighting areas where internet service providers provide internet speeds that meet that federal threshold of broadband, which is 25 megabits per second downloading speeds, and then 3 megabits per second uploading speeds. So this is, again, areas that show fixed broadband. You don't see areas served by mobile or satellite providers in this map, but what you can see, right, is that there's some real clear areas, especially in our rural and tribal communities, that are lacking access to fixed broadband service. Our tribal areas here are listed in yellow, but also in the urban areas, right, you see a lot of pockets that are lacking access as well. And one thing to note about this data set is that this is data as reported by the internet service providers. So these are advertised speeds that you're seeing here. What you experience at home may actually be a little bit different. In terms of adoption and affordability of broadband, we also took a look at census data, American Community Survey data, to identify areas in the region where broadband adoption is low. So this map here is showing higher concentrations of lower income households that may not have an internet connection and or computer at home. Again, similar to that earlier map I showed, you can see that there's a lot of high concentrations of communities in the rural areas that are lacking broadband subscriptions, but there's also, a lot of pockets in the southern portion of the county, areas like City Heights, Logan Heights, National City, San Ysidro, that are lacking reliable connections at home. And, these are the same communities that are also facing some of the most severe impacts and were impacted most by the COVID-19 pandemic, have the highest unemployment rates, challenges with accessing transportation. So providing connectivity to these communities is really critical. After looking at the cost of plans available in the region, it's really no surprise that adoption is low throughout the county. Paying something like $50, $70 a month for internet is not manageable for many households. And in some parts in our rural areas, the lowest price available to you is as low as $90 a month, which is, just kind of ridiculous to be facing that in today's day and age. And a key reason why cost of service is high could be the lack of competition. This map here shows the number of providers that are providing that fixed broadband service in the region. Most of the region is served by one, maybe two providers. And this really limits the kinds of subscription plans that are available to households and the cost of service. In the urban areas, you may have access to a little bit more options, but especially if you're in our rural or tribal communities, your choices are severely limited. In many parts of our region and throughout the state and the country, we've seen many municipalities, many organizations deploy mobile hotspots or provide temporary internet connections to be able to provide connectivity to community members during the pandemic. And this has been a great solution to solve many of the short-term needs that we were seeing on a daily basis. But we took a look at some speed test data that we were able to acquire and actually found that widely in our region, services provided by mobile broadband, so the mobile hotspots, cell phones, aren't delivering the kind of speeds needed to be able to fully participate in online learning or remote working. So as we're putting together a strategy, we're really looking for opportunities to provide a comprehensive and a long-term approach to improve accessibility of broadband. So this table here shows actually the zip codes in the region that have some of the lowest speeds, and similar to what I've shared earlier, right? A lot of these zip codes are in our rural areas. So a lot of our communities out there are facing really low performance of internet service. So a big part of the provision of broadband service is the infrastructure. That's an important part of how we get those connections and that service to our home. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the backbone network of internet service is fiber. And being able to map where fiber is located has been very difficult. That data is not publicly available, and most internet service providers do not share where they have invested in fiber. But with the help from the California Public Utilities Commission, which is the regulator of telecommunications in the state, and Caltrans, we've been able to identify census blocks where fiber is present. And so that's what you're seeing in this map here. The areas in blue are areas where fiber is passing through a census block. Now, this doesn't mean that the service is being used to provide internet to a home or a business. It doesn't mean that the service quality is good. It just means that fiber is passing through a community. But this does help to tell us where there's areas where there are clear gaps in that backbone and middle mile network, right? So no surprise that some of the biggest gaps are in the rural areas. There's some obvious holes in the urban areas as well. And I'll talk about this later in the presentation, but one of our strategies that we've developed with input from the task force is to expand broadband access and pursue partnership opportunities that allow us to expand the network and build out that infrastructure to help make better connections to our homes and businesses. We've already started to do that with the State Route 67 project that you're seeing here on the slide. We've partnered with Caltrans and the County of San Diego to demonstrate how you can dig once. So Caltrans is planning to repave 18 miles along State Route 67. And when you look at the map, you see a really clear gap in infrastructure. So the green is where the project is happening. And we're able to, with the help of the county, contribute some funding to add fiber and trenching as part of that scope. So what this allows us to do is to help fill in some of the critical gaps in the network. Caltrans and the county are able to use that fiber to connect their traffic signals, their assets, their facilities. And we're in the process now of looking for a partner, broadband provider partner who can leverage that infrastructure to enhance the kind of broadband service that's available in the rural areas. And that's a model that can be replicated throughout the region and the state. We've also been collecting data on where public sector fiber is available. And so when what you can see on the map here are the areas where there's fiber that is being exclusively used for transportation purposes. So this is fiber that MTS, NCTD, Sandec, and Caltrans own. And so this really highlights that there's an opportunity to leverage this fiber network and other public infrastructure to share that conduit and bring in more providers that ultimately will help to reduce the cost and provide better service in the region. So that is definitely a big part of our strategy moving forward. So we've been talking about the provision of broadband service, and I just shared some of the findings from the infrastructure side of the equation. And the deployment of this infrastructure really requires close coordination between our public and private sector partners. Internet service providers are typically the primary provisioners of broadband and infrastructure, but public agencies play a really key role in permitting those projects. And our oversight and our involvement in planning for broadband and implementing broadband is critical in ensuring that areas that have been historically overlooked are rural communities, a lot of areas in our urbanized portion of the region that will also have access to broadband. So we interviewed both providers and agencies to understand how they're handling broadband policies and permitting today. And this slide here highlights some of those key findings, which are really not surprising. To date, municipal involvement in broadband has really been limited, and local government has traditionally not treated broadband as an essential public service. So a big part of the strategy is highlighting the importance of broadband for so much of what we do. And in most jurisdictions, permitting processes for broadband can be quite confusing. They vary by jurisdiction. And that can lead to long and costly processes for the internet service providers. So simplifying the permitting process, incentivizing development in areas that are unserved or hard to reach is a really big part of the solution moving forward as well. So to achieve our vision for a connected region, we put together a set of strategies with input from the Regional Digital Divide Task Force. And these 7 overarching strategies are really intended to address the broad range of digital inequities in the region. I talked and shared a lot of information around the service and infrastructure side, but the strategies you see here are intended to also address the adoption side of the equation as well, right? So ensuring that people not only have access to internet, but also a device and have the proper tools, skills, training on how to connect to the internet and use that in their daily lives. So in the interest of time, I won't go through all of these strategies, but they were included as an attachment as part of the strategy in the agenda, attachment A. But I just want to highlight a few of the key strategies. And I've mentioned some of these throughout my presentation, but the infrastructure piece is an essential part of our strategy moving forward. So working with partners to build out the infrastructure and pursue opportunities to dig once or expand the network is a really important strategy moving forward. And as a transportation agency and a council of governments, Sandec really has a key role in mobilizing some of those partners through either our capital projects or public works projects. And so we'll learn a lot from 67 and hope to replicate that throughout the region. More broadly, we also just need to establish in the region that, a universal agreement that broadband is an essential public service and should be treated like other essential services. That means that municipalities need to plan for it. We need to have supportive policies. We need to have permitting practices that lead to development in areas where we need it. So we will be working closely with our public agency partners to develop those standard policies for the region. And on the adoption side of the equation, we really need to build capacity across the multitude of organizations that are working in this space. A lot of work needs to be done to advance digital equity inclusion. That includes creating more sustainable funding for programs that are advancing, digital literacy, are providing devices to households and providing education on how to connect to the internet in a way that's safe and doesn't preclude our privacy. And also another critical component of our strategy is to advocate for more and better data, as I mentioned, and this will help us, better understand where we need to target our investments moving forward, but also monitor as a region how much progress we've made as we begin to implement the strategies. In terms of next steps, we're now shifting gears a little bit and taking these 7 strategies and filling in the holes a little bit. We are going to be developing an action plan that has, under each of these strategies, a set of really clear near-term, midterm actions and responsible parties for implementing some of these strategies. So that's what we have next on the horizon for us. I shared a lot of data today, and certainly we've acquired a lot of data throughout the development of this strategy. But the task force, when we kicked off this work, also helped us develop a set of guiding principles, and many of those focus on transparency, accountability, education, data. And so, what better way to bring all of that to life by making the data that I just shared with you today publicly available. So we recently unveiled an interactive story map that allows community members, our partner organizations, to dive into the data a little bit further and learn more about the state of the digital divide in their community. So you can click on that link on this PowerPoint slide, and we can also include a link in the chat so you can peruse through that story map. It's currently available in English, and we are working to translate this and make it available in Spanish as well. So just to wrap up, a lot of the focus in my presentation today was on this regional strategy for bridging the digital divide, but we've already started a lot of work and began working on a lot of early actions. Many of you are familiar with the San Diego Futures Foundation. They're a member of our task force, but we just donated computers to the San Diego Futures Foundation, which will be refurbished and provided to households for free or at low cost. And so part of the strategy moving forward is encouraging our partner organizations, member agencies to also consider donating computers. So we wanted to give a shout out to San Diego Futures Foundation. And if any of you are interested in connecting with them, we're happy to make that connection. Many of you have probably heard a lot of the initiatives happening at the state and federal level. There is so much momentum with things like the federal infrastructure package, a lot of state legislation to provide more broadband funding to expand broadband in the region. And so Sandec is actively participating and advocating for this funding in coordination with some of our regional agencies. I talked about the State Route 67, but that's our first opportunity to help build out some of the critical broadband infrastructure in our region. And we're hoping to expand on that and use that to help the state inform their Dig Once policies. We're also developing a fiber sharing agreement that can be used as a model for Sandec, Caltrans, other public agencies who may be interested in also, sharing fiber or building out the broadband network and sharing that with other partners as well. And we're coordinating closely with our sister agency, the Southern California Association of Governments, to help have a coordinated effort around digital equity. And so we are actually in the process of wrapping up and hopefully soon releasing a request for partnerships so that we can pre-qualify broadband providers so that as grant funding becomes available, we're able to work with the broadband providers to expand the broadband network and provide more affordable, more reliable, more high quality services to our communities. And one other thing I wanted to highlight is that we're going to be having a workshop in partnership with SCAG on public housing and broadband. That workshop is happening October 21st from 1:30 to 4 p.m. We will be sending the meeting invitation to all of you via Jane and Catherine. But really the purpose of this meeting is to explore needs and opportunities to be able to connect residents in affordable housing developments to higher speed internet service. So we're putting together an exciting panel of affordable housing leaders, internet service providers, and state stakeholders, and we'd love to have you attend and also participate because we know a lot of you are actively involved in housing issues. So just to wrap up in terms of next steps, we will be, our digital equity strategy was shared with all of you. We're in the process of finalizing that, and we'll be going to our board of directors on October 22nd to share the findings of that strategy. And then we are working on that action plan that I mentioned, and we'll be finalizing that in November and presenting that to our board of directors in December. If you'd like to stay in touch with some of the information I've shared today, links to our story map, to our strategy, you can visit our digital equity webpage, which is on the slide here. It's our one-stop shop where you can learn more information about so many of the digital equity initiatives we have underway. So with that, I will wrap up my presentation and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Crystal. We are going to start, so this is committee member comment period. I saw Faye's hand go up first, and then we're going to follow by Konani and Craig. And so this is the opportunity for you guys to speak. So please make sure you raise your hand or turn on your camera. Faye, the floor is yours.
First of all, I just want to thank you so much for this great presentation on digital divide. I work at Samahan Health Centers, and one of the biggest issues that we encounter with our televisit and telehealth program is broadband. It just like keeps falling off, not only from our side, but also from our patient side. So we really see the big need to have interconnectivity and broadband access, especially for low-income communities such as ours. And so I was just thinking if there has been conversation, I know that you have spoken about this, if there has been conversations going on or studies being made on transitioning it into a private good, into a public good, because right now we see broadband as a private good, But if we transition it into a public good, then there's more access, just like electricity. I was just, while you were talking, electricity came to my mind, because in the past, electricity was not accessible, but it became accessible when it was transitioned into a public good. So I would just like to advocate that this broadband or interconnectivity, broadband services and access, there should be some conversations, at least on transitioning it into public good, and that so that there'll be more access across regions, across income, and across ethnic groups, across everyone. So, but again, thank you so much. And I just want to let you know that we really appreciate you including the low-income communities, because we're really the ones suffering when we face these kind of issues with our patients.
Thank you. Konani, floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of comments. The first one was if you could let us know a little bit more about the work that's being done in the schools and local libraries to sort of provide that gap in access to broadband. It seems to me that those are good facilities to allow students and their families to access broadband after school and perhaps even on the weekend to ensure that they can do their remote learning and have that access. And then my second comment is about wireless connections. I know that broadband is the gold standard, right, and the goal for ultimate access. But I teach at the university, and I see a lot of diversity in the way that students access online platform or learning platforms. And in some cases, I have students doing all of their work on their cell phone. And so I think we need to make sure we keep in account the way that people use their devices, and that unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, the wireless does play a big role in most people's lives with the cell phone. And even with the remote learning at times when people don't have access to a broadband connection. And I'd like to see that sort of being paid attention to, as well as sort of the way that people use these multiple strategies to access the internet. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Craig, the floor is yours.
Thank you. A question for Crystal. Crystal, I'm wondering if local franchise agreements for the telephone and cable services, if those franchise agreements can be used as ways to require better distribution and availability of broadband.
Crystal, do you want me to jump in?
Sure. I was just going to add, Craig, that, I mentioned this briefly, but the California Public Utilities Commission is the regulator of telecommunications. And so, I think it's an interesting time that there's a lot of attention on broadband. And so I think the CPUC is actively looking at, what's on the table and how we can better integrate broadband, and, to Faye's point, how can we treat it like a public utility? So, I think we're exploring all options. Certainly regionally, we're encouraging public agencies and exploring, ways in which we can standardize and integrate broadband into all of our plans and our projects.
So will it take a change in state law to use the franchise agreements then?
Yeah, it would. It would have to come from the state.
We can lobby for that. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. I don't see anybody else's hand up or their camera on. If anybody else has anything to add, and if you, do we have any comments from the public, clerk?
I don't see any hands raised, Chairwoman Moreno.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Crystal, for presenting.
Actually, I see a hand now from Tim Balach.
Good afternoon. Thank you for these excellent presentations today. My name is Timothy Bailash. I'm a physician and scientist in San Diego County. And I want to echo Konani Martinez's comments. What are the ideas to integrate these improved internet service with library services? To diversify the fast speed access as distinct from making access at concentrated learning centers rather than at home, where there could be other staffers to help facilitate learning. And in that regard, open access was mentioned about making it into a public access. We clearly have had a decreased learning with use of primarily internet videos. And so access to textbooks, if this replaces that or doesn't connect with the library systems and good librarians, may not facilitate that aspect of internet broadband. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else, any other member of the public wishing to speak. So thank you, Crystal. We appreciate you presenting. We're going to move on to item number 5. We're going to continue the presentation from our last meeting, and this is the Regional Bikeway program. We were not able to take up the second part of the presentation, so we're going to start from there. Remember that this amendment will be made to better align the remaining projects in the Regional Bikeway EAP with the goals and strategies of the upcoming 2021 regional plan. Chris Kluth is here to present, and take it away, Chris.
Chair, I can go to the next slides, please. So I'm going to try and pick up as best I can where we left off last time and really kind of get more to the meat of where we're going. Just a quick recap, what we're talking about is being able to complete the Bike Early Action Program, deal with construction cost increases, and talk about our funding strategies in the short term, long term, and as the chair just mentioned, really make a focus on investments in historically underserved communities. So let's move forward and see where we want to pick up here. So these projects are fully funded for construction. They'll be going out to bid over the next 6 months or so. So these are all projects that are in or support connections in disadvantaged areas. And next slide. And so I think I kind of already went over this, but again, the focus of what we're talking about is the future of our Bike Early Action Program. Next slide. So these are the actions that at this point we took to our board last month, and these proposed, well, not proposed, these are the fiscal year 22 budget amendments for these 5 projects that'll advance these 5 projects to construction at least 6 to 9 months earlier than they would have, maybe even a little bit more. So that's all good, and all of these have a significant amount of grant funding that we were able to use our local Transnet dollars to leverage and be more competitive for these. For like the higher dollar construction grants. Next slide. Okay, so this is where we're kind of getting into more of where we're looking ahead and laying out our long-term strategy for the Early Action Program and really for active transportation in the region as a whole. And there's kind of the short term, there's a kind of a middle step, and then these longer term strategies that I'll get to in a second. So to complete the EAP as it stands now, we estimate we'll need about another $112 million. And so how are we proposing to get this money? We're running at about a 50% match right now. So we would need potentially, $55 million in local funds that would come from different resources. But really having more opportunities to match our local dollars is what's going to be critical. So there's really 3 parts to this. 2 parts. The first one is a potential Transnet amendment, and that would be to increase the percentage of funding that's allocated to the Bicycle Pedestrian Neighborhood Safety Program. Right now, it stands at 2% per year. And so depending on revenues, we estimate that each additional percentage point would generate about $3 million a year. So we've used this money, like I said, to position ourselves well to compete for other grant funds, and having the Transnet, be a long-term funding source. The early part of the EAP is being able to bond or borrow against those future funds, which have allowed us to bring the construction of these projects up earlier, rather than going in a completely linear way and having some of the projects done out in 2045, for example. This allows us to bring having more access to the transit allows us to bring our projects forward sooner. So adding some more revenues to that would allow us to start on our next batch of projects. And then the second part of the proposed amendment would be to consider moving the bike program into the Sandec Major Corridors program. So the existing transit ordinance already includes elements of complete streets provision and direction to accommodate travel for people walking and biking. And that applies to all new projects in the region that are funded with Transnet. That includes all the projects in Sandec's major corridor programs as well. So, but we can really strengthen that, and we need to rethink the aspect of how we do things and figure out, how to do more with what we're doing. And we need to break down kind of the more traditional siloed approach where unfortunately too often the significant bike and ped projects are pursued as separate projects. And we'll always have those where we'll need to do that, but we need to maximize on our opportunities to integrate multiple modes of travel into our major corridor projects, our CMCPs, and our future mobility hubs as well. So from a practical point of view, moving into the bike program into the major corridors just gives us a lot more flexibility, a lot more access to funding, and a lot more opportunities to better integrate into the bigger projects. And then the other part of the strategy is to take a fresh look at reprioritizing our bike EAP projects to better align with the social equity goals, and really also the future opportunities that we see coming along to better make these investments match up with state and federal funding sources that we see to be more competitive for those. So we're working right now to update our prioritization process. It's really almost a revamping of what we did before. We're taking the criteria from the regional plan. It's more demand-based. It's newer, better data. And then on top of that, we'll be layering Cal Enviro, and that's kind of a very well established set of criteria that identifies kind of different levels of disadvantaged communities. And then we would also be looking to get data from additional CBO network communities as well. So I mean, that's kind of that's the middle term, and longer term, we have an action from the regional plan to implement and develop a new regional active transportation program. And that's when we'll be able to take a bigger picture look at bringing all of these elements together, the existing bike network, better coordination with local plans, local trails, our major corridor projects, and very importantly, the mobility hubs, and all of that will overlay with a much stronger emphasis on social equity. Oh, I forgot to mention our old criteria. It was pretty good, and it was mostly demand-based, and looked to where we could put projects that are going to get the most potential ridership. So in the denser parts of the region. So a lot of that did overlay with disadvantaged communities anyway. So that's good, but we could obviously do a lot better and have more focus on that. So moving forward, that's kind of our middle term and longer term strategy for active transportation. Go to the next slide, please. And so here we are in the fall, kind of trying to continue our stakeholder engagement. We have several different groups, including this one that we'll be going to, and then we'll be going back to the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee, the Transportation Committee, and then ultimately to the board early part of next year. And these proposed amendments will likely be a part of a larger package that I think you've probably heard about for the Transnet amendments for renewed transit investments and those kinds of things that our board will consider making those amendments and kind of realigning Transnet with today's goals and objectives. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I'm happy to expand on anything or clarify, answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, committee members, this is once again your opportunity to ask any questions or make any comments regarding this item. So if you don't mind raising your hand or turning on your camera. Give you a few minutes here. Randy?
Sure, thanks, Chair. I don't know. Appreciate thank you staff for presenting here today, and City HCDC and the built environment team are really excited for this item. We spoke in favor of it at the Transportation Committee a couple weeks ago. We're really especially excited to see the advancement of University Avenue Bikeway, which will connect City Heights, Eastern area, La Mesa, while improving the dangerous intersections of Estrella and University, 54th and University, Choice Parkway and University. And another project that's advanced is the Orange Avenue Family Bikeway. And that's a term that our residents have coined. The built environment team leaders have been involved with the project since 2012, so almost 10 years now. And this is a really transformative project that's going to involve regional traffic diverters, and it connects many schools, parks, homes throughout City Heights. So we're really excited about it, but 10 years is a long time to get these planned. I know Chris would love to, and your team would love to get them installed much more quickly. So, really any policy and direction of resources that can reduce the timeline of these needed investments is appreciated. So we support the efforts that you did mention to do that. And, even if that means growing the size of the active transportation program with more staff so that more projects can be planned more quickly, then I think that should be considered as well. Someone who grew up in an underserved community in South Bay, Castle Park, neighborhood of Chula Vista, I've personally just, you can speak to the experience of, growing up in a place that did not have safe streets for walking and biking. And getting to the Blue Line was, and still to this day, is something that's I don't think is a very dignified experience or very safe, to be honest. If when you're walking or biking in the blue line, it feels like, and orange line as well, it feels like you're doing something that society didn't intend for you to do. It feels very car-oriented space going down Palomar, 8th Street and the 5. And I know, Chris, you talked about the reprioritization of projects. I know we discussed this, one-on-one about how can we add new projects. So I'd love to learn a little bit more from you about what that looks like, because I see a lot of value in like a safe routes to blue line plan, a safe routes to orange line plan. We know that 58,000 people before COVID were riding blue line every day. That's more than the size of some cities in this region. Yet it feels like an unsafe place to walk and bike. So I'd love to figure out how we can change that. I know that council member Giri brought that up, the TC. Hassan, shared some thoughts on the record. So I'd just love to brainstorm and hear from you about, like, what does that look like to add new projects? What's that reprioritization going to look like? So those are some thoughts. Overall, support this, and this is the creative, bold approach that we need. Thank you.
Do you want to take more comments, or I can provide a kind of a brief answer to Randy for now?
Yes, please.
Sure. Yeah. So right now we're kind of in the middle step phase where we're looking to reprioritize the universe of projects from that 2013 early action program. And that'll probably take us through a couple of years of projects. So adding new projects, that will be part of, and we really see this, as an incredible opportunity. The more I'm thinking, I'm kind of like haven't gone that far ahead, but I'm starting to now, knowing that one of the actions that I mentioned from the regional plan is a new regional active transportation plan. And we already have something that's very robust that's scoped out for that effort. We'll be able to tie all of these things together in a comprehensive way, and integrate Vision Zero and the social equity aspect, and really, as a companion piece to the regional plan, that will provide us with the detail. And of course, we'll need a new funding measure to implement these projects, but that's where we'll be able to really think about the best way to add the new projects and which ones we're going to do. I think, the projects in mobility hub areas and capitalizing on our big regional transit investments, those clearly would make sense to kind of jump to the top and be the next next batch of projects that would be looked at the regional level. And how are we going to get people to these bigger projects? Because you can't drive everywhere. Not everyone can drive to the trolley station, and nor should they. So it's those are going to be I think some of our greatest opportunities to really to make those kinds of improvements.
Thank you, Chris. Randy, did that complete your questions and comments, or would you?
Yes.
Like?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Chris.
No, thank you. I don't see any other committee member wishing to speak. I'm going to take it over to the attendees, and I see.
There is a hand, Chair Moreno. Tim Balash has his hand up.
Thank you so much again. Thank the members and participants for this informational meeting. I've learned a lot. Any thought to include a county-wide school bike safety program, such as the Bike Walk Solano do, who currently sponsors weekend bike safety certification courses for the high schoolers? And could it be integrated with some police and fire safety education in those presentations, whether that fits within a county program?
Yeah, we've thought about that before. We had a pretty big grant a number of years ago that was done in conjunction with county health. Realistically, those are pretty expensive programs to manage, and we should do them. It's a matter of where they kind of fall and the funding priorities. It's maybe not always. I think regional policies on that are good. Efforts like that, maybe some of them, a lot of them are better administrated at a more local level. Of course, we want consistency in the region, and I think there are policies in the new regional plan that address those issues that you brought up.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Clerk, is there anybody else who would like to be acknowledged just from the public?
It looks like we have a member again, Randy Torres Van Vleck.
Sure, if there's no one else to speak, I'll wait, but I did have a follow-up if there's time at the end.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Chris, I did have a couple of follow-up questions as I thought more about it. What's the timeline for the new regional active transportation plan? That's a big lift, because I know the first one was planned in 2008 or so. I was at some of those meetings actually. And then other question is, what does the active transportation planning component look like for the mobility hubs, right? Like, let's just say San Isidro, I believe that there's some movement there for the mobility hub. Does the AT team, like, are they in those meetings? Are they tasked with like developing a separate strategy that analyzes how people are getting to that mobility hub? Can you help explain to us what that will look like?
Yeah, so for the corridor projects and the mobility hubs there, we have interdisciplinary teams working on those. I think the implementation of, and I don't know if Antoinette is still on, she could probably speak better to the mobility hubs themselves. But we already have an idea of how we're going to go about, well, at least our recommendations on active transportation elements in the mobility hubs. I mean, essentially, we're looking at protected bikeways or like traffic calm bike boulevards. Those are mostly the two types of bike projects that we're looking at. And then as we take the complete streets approach to those, we always try and integrate as many ped improvements as possible as well. So, traffic calming around all of those and making sure we have as many protected bikeways as possible. Of course, we don't know where they'll be until we start getting into each planning area. That'll look slightly different, but that's going to be our overall approach, is to not waste a lot of time messing around with, gee, what should we put over here? It's like, we know that this is the best type of facility, and it'll be a little bit different, but and that's kind of partially how we're going to try and save some time as well. Not going to reinvent the wheel. We know what's best, and we're going to try and go with what's best and safest.
Thank you. Ms. Carol Lewis, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Chair Moreno. I've been working with the city of El Cajon, and we are finally developing an active transportation plan for the city. So I think that we're way behind the 8 ball on this one. And I think we've lost a lot of opportunities to look at some of our active transportation opportunities that we had for bike lanes that we've had, on the books for a long time, but without a plan. They just weren't being funded. So I just wanted to thank you for this. And I really look forward to hearing future plans of what you're developing, and just want to encourage you to remember the East County.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see anybody else with their hands raised or the public wishing to be acknowledged. So thank you, Chris, for the presentation.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to item number 8, which is possible topics for the next meeting. Let's see, the topics that we have are Sandag's new affordable housing grant program and Harbor Drive 2.0 concept of operations. If there are any other suggestions, please feel free to contact me or Sandag staff. Now, do any committee members wish to speak on the item number 8? Or clerk, I don't see anybody, but clerk, is there anybody that wishes to be acknowledged from the public? Oh, Monica, I see you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, and first I want to start by thanking everybody. The presentations were really great. We especially like the presentation on the digital equity strategies, and we're very thankful and appreciative for that being brought forward here in San Ysidro. That's a very, very real thing to us. And also in the holistic implementation of adaptive strategies, we noticed one of the things that stood out to us was an image on the San Ysidro Mobility Hub. And we really want to start talking and advocating for the creation of a special working group that specifically deals with the challenges for the San Ysidro Mobility Hub. And we see that aligning with everything from, digital equity, the border to Bayshore Bikeway. And so what we're going to be doing is hopefully sending a formal request soon and asking for recommendations that we bring this up for discussion. Thank you.
Duly noted. Thank you, Monica. We appreciate that. Anybody else wishing to be acknowledged at this present moment? I don't see anybody. I don't see anybody in the public. So we're going to move on to item number 10, and that's our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, November 4th, 2021 at 10 a.m. It is to my understanding that we're holding the remainder of this year's working group meetings virtually. So if we have, unless we have any questions from the committee members or the public, that will officially adjourn today's meeting. We are officially adjourned. Thank you so much. Everybody have a beautiful rest of the month, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.